Welcome back to the channel. This will be my team selection for Gameweek 11, where I only have one free transfer and just use the bench boost, so I'll talk about my performance in Gameweek 10. Also reel off some transfer plans, which I have not just for this Gameweek, but also in the long term. And I've also got the wildcard and free hit chips in my back pocket, and I've discussed over the last piece of content my sort of plans for those chips, and I think the most likely strategy is to wildcard in Gameweek 12 or 13, whilst I'm more open-minded about the free hit. I previously thought about Gameweek 11 as a possibility, and whilst it's not completely impossible, I think it's still something I could do. I think it's becoming less likely over the coming days, so that's something I'll delve into throughout this podcast. The same goes for FPL Challenge in this intro section. So Jordan Pickford is in my team with Gabriel, Salah, and a front three of Haaland, Joao Pedro as my captain, and Jean-Philippe Mateta. And this week, it is called Change the Game, so double bonus points will be awarded, and that is essentially all it comes down to. So I've picked some players with a great chance of getting bonus points, and with Pickford, it's really just a decent chance of a clean sheet. You can only pick one player per club, otherwise I'd have been very tempted to go for David Raya between the sticks, but I might make a few other modifications, add more midfielders, for example, and take away this front three. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy, which I'll cover until the end of the season, and Matchday 5 videos and live streams will be headed your way after the international break. If you want to see a predicted lineups podcast before the Gameweek 11 deadline, then let's get this video to 150 likes and close in on new goals like 38k on YouTube. Also check my links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, fair likes to my videos, prior to comments, amongst many other perks, my Discord server, the FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Game week 10 marked the first time that I've ever used the bench boost in a single game week, and I have to say, to be honest with you, it was quite disappointing, but my starting 11 was still very solid. Robert Sanchez kept a clean sheet against Tottenham Hotspur in a 1-0 victory, and my decision in the deadline stream was selling Sanchez to Raya or Pedro Porro to Jurrien Timber, and for several reasons, like the fact I backed Chelsea more than Tottenham Hotspur in that clash, and also Chelsea having better fixtures over the next 3 game weeks, I decided to keep Robert Sanchez and sell Pedro Porro to Jurrien Timber, so I gained 4 points from that decision, and my defensive line was very solid overall. I vice-captain Gabriel, he got 12 points, and after the Saturday I was thinking maybe I should have gone for it because I wasn't that bullish on Erling Haaland scoring a brace or hat-trick against Bournemouth, but he did so against the Cherries on Sunday with 2 goals, and he is so crucial to that Man City team. If he doesn't score, you don't know where the goals are going to come from in general, but against Borussia Dortmund there were some positive signs, a 4-1 win, and Erling Haaland only scored 1 of them. But Gabriel got an assist and maximum bonus points once again. He is just an absolute machine when it comes to DEFCON. Also the clean sheets, he can get goals and assists very regularly for a centre-back, so Gabriel is by far the best defender in the game. He costs 6.6 million now, and I still think he's worth that price tag. Jurrien Timber does cost 6.1, as I'll get into in the price section, but it wasn't anything spectacular from him, only 6 points, and that's been the case over the last couple of weeks. My favourite way of covering Arsenal defensively in the long term is Gabriel, but in second place would probably be David Raya, as I've said from the beginning of the season, and Timber would be third. But as I covered before, there were several reasons why I decided to go for this sort of structure, and I'm looking to wildcard in Gameweek 12 or 13, where the most likely scenario is that I'll buy David Raya as my set and forget goalkeeper, and perhaps change Jurrien Timber to a different option in this position. Now, Munoz is the most exciting Crystal Palace defender to own in FPL, but he only got 6 points, whilst Lacroix secured defensive contributions in that victory there for Crystal Palace. So I think Lacroix is a solid option for the long term, and Crystal Palace will be one of the best defences in the Premier League this season. You've also got Chris Richards and all these other options I've mentioned before, and ultimately you can't go wrong with any of them. Mark Gay has been the best so far this season, but Lacroix has a very high ceiling when it comes to DEFCON, and I'm very happy with his 8-pointer. Now, going into the midfield, there were a few frustrations here, especially with Ismaila Sarr, who went through on goal against Brentford and hit the post, and that was very, very disappointing. The same goes for Bruno Fernandes, who got an assist for Casemiro, but he also hit the post against Nottingham Forest, and Antoine Semenyo blanked. But the start of the show was in Dye, who is now yellow flagged. I covered his injury in my transfer tips, and David Moyes said it was just cramp and he was feeling something, and he insinuated that he should be okay. I believe he'll be available for Gameweek 11 against Fulham at home, and that'll be a massive boost for the Toffees and my FPL team. He got maximum bonus points. In fact, he got 2 bonus and 9 points overall, Iliman and Dye. So I'm still quite happy with him. Antoine Semenyo has blanked now in the last couple of matches. It's Aston Villa away next, so we'll see how he gets on. But for those that haven't invested, there's no real need to go for him at this moment in time. And I've said that for the last couple of weeks as well. But I'm still quite bullish on Ismaila Sarr, and Bruno Fernandes is still decent. He has been frustrating this season, but it's another return here. And over the last 3 game weeks, he has been getting something across the board, so it's better than nothing. I'll look at it that way. And as for my front 3, 2 of them did very well, but Voltemada was the one letting me down this time. Recently it's been Joao Pedro with 5 consecutive blanks, but he scored the winner against Tottenham Hotspur and also secured maximum bonus points. But he was also very disappointing in the sense that he missed multiple big opportunities. Erling Haaland did what Erling Haaland always does, and he got the brace. He is by far the standout captaincy option in most game weeks now. Even against Liverpool at home, he would be right up there. Towards the end of this podcast, I'll highlight the top 10 captaincy options. Liverpool look more solid now with back-to-back clean sheets against Real Madrid and Aston Villa. But Erling Haaland has been scoring at will, and he is scoring more goals than games played in the Premier League and across all competitions. So he's on fire. He is the default captain by choice, and there aren't any other premiums or reliable options who will offer the consistency and the high ceiling that Erling Haaland does. So the captaincy does seem a bit redundant at this point, but hopefully things change over the coming weeks. And Nick Voltemada was subbed off at half-time in a 3-1 loss against West Ham. Anthony Gordon had a hip injury, and that was the main reason for his substitution, but Nick Voltemada was quite ineffective. He had no service against West Ham, but Newcastle bounced back in the Champions League with a 2-0 win over Athletic Bilbao. Nick Voltemada needs to score more goals away from home. That's something I've talked about with Victor Gyökeres. I know he scored against Brighton a few weeks ago, and he got 8 points there, but generally speaking, most of his returns have been at St James's Park, and the next fixture, of course, will be against Brentford away. So I'm not that optimistic about Nick Voltemada for Game Week 11, but I don't think he's necessarily a sell in the long term. As for my bench boost, it was horrendous. I'm not going to deny that. I did say this before, that if I didn't play the bench boost, there was the possibility I just started Dan Burn over Lacroix, so maybe I would have gained his points. Who knows though? The players on my bench were terrible. Dubravka got 2 points against Arsenal in a 2-0 loss. I had Reinders, who didn't even start against Bournemouth. He came on for the last 20 minutes or so and almost scored towards the end of the game. And what does he do in the Champions League? He gets 2 assists, so the less said about Reinders, the better. Dan Burn did very well in the Champions League. He's in my UCL fantasy team and he scored against Athletic Bilbao, one of the best headers you'll ever see, and he got a massive return there. I think 12 to 13 points, but in FPL, it's only a 1-pointer after conceding multiple goals against West Ham. And Reinildo Mandava also just got 2 points by basically playing, and that's about it. A 1-1 draw against Everton, but at least I had Ndiaye to get something on the Monday, and despite a horrendous bench boost, it was a massive rank rise, 93 points, and I'm now up to 600,000 in the world. And over the last 6 game weeks, I've gotten 5 green arrows, only 1 blip, I believe, in Game Week 9, but still very solid, generally speaking, and that's why I haven't used the wildcard when my original plan was to use it at around Game Week 8 or 9, but Game Week 12 or 13 looks the most likely for me when it comes to bolstering my 15-man squad, also chasing fixture swings and other factors to really set up a foundation until the second half of the season. And let's not forget, everyone gets 5 free transfers for Game Week 16, so that's why wildcarding in Game Week 13 could be a bit awkward, but if you play it the right way, and also Game Week 12, the same applies to those wildcarders as well, if you play it just right, you can chase the fixture swings, be aggressive, use up your transfers, and then with those 5 available moves in Game Week 16, you can have a great foundation until the second half of the season and save the second wildcard until very deep into the campaign. And that's where after Game Week 30, we'll have doubles and blanks, and there's going to be a very template sort of structure and also chip strategy, which I talked about in that video as well. But let me discuss some prices before delving into my transfer plans for Game Week 11. Robert Sanchez is still 4.8 million, and Lacroix went down in price to 5 million over the past week or two. Jurien Timber 6.1, and Gabriel is the most expensive defender at 6.6. Bruno Fernandes is 8.9 million, whilst Ismaila Sarr is at 6.6. He recently went up in price over the past week, and Antoine Semenyo has increased in price more than anybody else. He is still at 8.1 million, and Bournemouth's long-term fixtures are still quite promising. Indai is yellow flagged. I think that'll be cleared fairly soon, and he does cost 6.5 million. So Jack Grealish got all the attention and transfers in. He cost 6.9 million in comparison. But Joao Pedro went down to 7.4 million, and we could even see him rise back to 7.5 over the coming days, facing Wolves at home and Burnley away over the next two. But he did start in the Champions League against Karabag in a 2-2 draw, and Erling Haaland is the most expensive player in the game at 14.8 million. Nick Voltemade is 7.5 million, but the most popular forward to buy right now is Jean-Philippe Mateta. On my bench, I've got 2 4 million options in Dubravka and Reinildo Mandava. Reinders has gone down to 5.5 million after some stinkers and that benching against Bournemouth. And the last player is Dan Burn, who recently went up to 5.2 million, but that could change fairly soon. The most important thing, though, is the transfer plans and how can we optimize our team for Gameweek 11 and beyond. And the first transfer I'm considering is if Indai somehow is injured for the long term. I've got enough money to go to Declan Rice because I have 0.4 million in the bank. Rice costs 6.8 and Indai is at 6.5, but I don't see myself doing this as much as I like Declan Rice. The alternative midfielder to buy would be Enzo Fernandez, kind of targeting the next 2 fixtures, and even if I wildcard in 12 or 13, I think a Chelsea midfielder could really help me out, whether it's Caicedo or Enzo Fernandez, who is my favourite and my preference over the next 2, but that also depends on other factors. Now, I could also do something like this over the coming weeks, like Bruno Fernandes to Brian Mbeumo, and then I could sell my weak link in the midfield, Reinders up to Caicedo, but if I were to do that now, it would be a -4 hit, and I don't think it's worth selling Bruno to Mbeumo as part of that sort of hit and a -4. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. That would be a set of transfer plans for Game Week 12 instead, with 2 available moves, but I think the most likely thing for me is to roll this week, and as things stand, this will be my provisional team selection for Game Week 11, and between the sticks, there is no debate about it. Robert Sanchez will be in goal, facing Wolves at home, but Chelsea have been suspect defensively against Wolves in the past, and this could still be the case despite the fact that the opposition will be without a manager. As things stand, that could obviously change in the coming days, but Chelsea have really struggled against Wolves for some reason, even at Stamford Bridge, and defensively this season they have had some good moments, but I think generally speaking they are quite inconsistent. It doesn't also help that Enzo Maresca keeps changing his defensive line and there isn't a fixed starting 11 and also back 4. Obviously rotation and management is very important, but I feel like sometimes they tinker a little bit too much. As for my defensive line, I'm going for Lacroix, Timber and Gabriel. I'm not as bullish on the Arsenal defence against Sunderland away, and after the international break is Tottenham at home and Chelsea away, so I could see a decrease in the clean sheet output for Arsenal. If they were to keep one this weekend, they would set an all-time record in English football by keeping 9 successive clean sheets. They're currently on a 10-game winning streak. They haven't conceded in the Champions League, so they're looking very solid right now and breaking many records, but the next couple of matches will be difficult. So for those that haven't doubled or tripled up on Arsenal defensively yet, I still think it's viable, and they have by far the best defence in the Premier League. You just might have to be mindful that there could be a reduction in the clean sheet output and you need to be patient. In terms of timing, it might not be the very best to do so against Sunderland away. Next up, though, I've got a midfield 4 of Bruno Fernandes, Ismaila Sarr, Semenyo and Indai, and of course Lacroix will be in my defensive line facing Brighton at home, so I've got 2 Crystal Palace players. I don't mind tripling up with Jean-Philippe Mateta, but I don't feel like it's necessary selling one of Joao Pedro or Nick Voltemade to the Frenchman. And with Crystal Palace, they've got the best fixtures for the next 6 to 7 game weeks, right up there with Chelsea and Arsenal, but I don't think I have to do that. And until I see a need to sell Joao Pedro, which will likely be in Game Week 13, I'm quite happy sticking with a double up here. Bruno Fernandes is facing Tottenham away in the early kickoff. I think him and Mbeumo would be the best options from that game. And if you want a Man United player, those are the 2 to pick from, and I wouldn't go for anybody else. And Antoine Semenyo is still worth starting against Aston Villa away after a few blanks, and even when he returned against Crystal Palace a few weeks ago, it was a booking and just an assist in a free draw. So he has been underwhelming for quite some time now, and towards the beginning of the season he certainly overperformed, but the stats are still good enough to point towards future returns, so I'm not too concerned about Antoine Semenyo. And Indai has been brilliant for me. One of my favourite midfielders and assets so far this season. He can score DEFCON, he's on penalties, and he's got the goals and assist potential, but mainly from the goals because his teammates are terrible finishers. It is Fulham at home next, and Everton would be fancied to win that game, but it isn't a guarantee, and their record against Fulham isn't exactly the greatest. But to complete this team, it's going to be a front three of João Pedro, Erling Haaland, and Nick Voltemada. And I'm not as keen on Voltemada now after that stinker against West Ham. And I think Newcastle can be very inconsistent. They've been better in the Champions League, actually. They've scored 10 goals in that competition, the same as the Premier League in 6 fewer matches. But I still think Voltemada has something to offer over the coming weeks, particularly in the home matches. It might sound strange, but I would back Nick Voltemada more in the game against Man City compared to Brentford away this week. Erling Haaland will be facing Liverpool at home, and that's going to be a massive clash at the top of the Premier League table. Arsenal are 6 points clear of Man City, so I think a draw would be the perfect result for the Gunners. But either way, one of those teams will drop points at least, maybe even both of them, and Erling Haaland could be the difference maker once again, while João Pedro is facing Wolves at home, and he has been a bit frustrating recently, but he is still the second highest scoring forward in FPL, only behind Haaland and just above Jean-Philippe Mateta and Igor Thiago. On my bench, there is no bench boost now. I've gotten rid of that chip, and to be honest, it would have been even better to have deployed it in Gameweek 9, for example, and that wasn't a great bench either. But I've got Dubravka facing West Ham away. You could make a case for starting him. I know a lot of people have him and Esteve or a double up in Burnley defensively, but I think West Ham will score in that game. Reinders is first on my bench, facing Liverpool at home. Then I've got Dan Burn away to Brentford and Reinildo Mandava facing Arsenal at home. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a return or two on my bench, and then I'll be frustrated about not saving the bench boost for a little while longer, but I still don't have any regrets about it because I felt like my bench was quite solid on paper, and I felt one return was very likely. It didn't happen in the end. I believe Reinders being benched was the final nail in the coffin for my bench boost. It was a good decision, but a bad outcome. I actually had a good feeling about Reinders against Bournemouth. I thought if he started that game, which was my opinion, then he could do really well. He also had that chance, of course, as I mentioned, towards the end of the match. So I think with more minutes, he would have had a good opportunity to get a goal contribution. And it's quite frustrating that a few days later against Borussia Dortmund, he gets 2 assists. That would have been very handy for my bench boost. But when it comes to the captaincy, Erling Haaland is still number one for me. I don't see any other standouts when it comes to putting the armband on someone you can rely upon with a high ceiling, someone really consistent this season. Even Jean-Philippe Mateta with his great numbers, he'd be right up there for the captaincy, but facing Brighton at home, that's going to be a tricky game for Crystal Palace. It's a rivalry between those two clubs, and I just look at the rest of the players. Enzo Fernandez and João Pedro are decent on paper against Wolves at home, but sometimes Chelsea can struggle against this opposition. Gabriel, Declan Rice and Saka are solid options. Maybe Marino could be a great punt after scoring a brace, and he's going to play as the number 9 in Victor Gyökeres' absence. The Swede and Martinelli will be out until after the international break, and Arsenal hope that both players are available for the North London derby in Gameweek 12. But then you look at the other options. Bryan Mbeumo and Bruno Fernandes are good, but Man United have struggled against Tottenham Hotspur recently. So when you kind of break it down, Salah against Man City away is still good, but I think Erling Haaland is still number 1. As usual, I'll highlight the expected points for my 15-man squad using the website Fantasy Football Hub. Robert Sanchez has 4.1 predicted points, whilst Lacroix offers 4.3. The Arsenal defence looks quite solid still. Timber has 5, and Gabriel is one of my highest players. In fact, Fantasy Football Hub recommend vice-captaining him over the rest of my players. Bruno Fernandes has 5.6, whilst Ismaila Sarr offers 5. Antoine Semenyo is still at 5.3, which is a bit lower than what he was producing towards the beginning of the season. And Ndai is still at 4, despite the yellow flag. João Pedro offers 5.7, so he's in the top 3 of the highest expected points in my 15-man squad. But Erling Haaland, as usual, is number 1 at 7.9. Nick Voltemada is quite low, offering 4.4 facing Brentford away, but I'm still cautiously optimistic about him over the next couple of weeks, particularly in the home fixtures. Dubravka offers 3.3, Reinders is at 1.9, Dan Burn is at 3.5, and Reinildo has 3.1. But this is all much lower than what Fantasy Football Hub and all these algorithms were saying for last week when I bench boosted, so it wouldn't surprise me now to see 1 or 2 returns on that bench to really rub salt in the wounds. But that is the expected points. I also delved into different stats, team news and injury updates and stuff like that, so hopefully this video has been useful to you. But let me visualize Gameweek 12 first using the website fpl.team and then show you the top 10 captaincy options for Gameweek 11. The lineup will be very similar to what I have planned for Gameweek 11, with Robert Sanchez in goal facing Burnley away. Lacroix is facing Wolves away, the same goes for Ismaila Sarr, and 2 Arsenal defenders in Timber and Gabriel facing Tottenham Hotspur in the North London derby at home. Ndai is up against Man United away, and Bruno Fernandes takes part in the same game with the home advantage. Antoine Semenyo up against West Ham looks very solid even after that really important win for Nuno Espirito Santo. And the front three comprise of Voldemort and Haaland, who both face each other. And ultimately, with a lot of these kind of clashes, you could say they're two attacking players from the opposition team, so they could still return in the same match. And I've got Joao Pedro up against Burnley away as well. So a few double-ups and obviously a few clashes there, but nothing like a forward up against the defender, which is a good thing. And on my bench, there's Dubravka facing Chelsea at home, Rangers away to Newcastle, Reinildo facing Fulham away, and Dan Burn would be last on my bench facing Man City at home. The expected points is 54.3 with 0.4 in the bank, and my temptation is to roll this week in Gameweek 11 and have 2 free transfers irrespective of if I wildcard in Gameweek 12 or 13. It's very useful to have more free transfers at your disposal, and then you can start using them up and bolstering your team for the Christmas period, so to speak, between November and December. And then we get 5 free transfers in Gameweek 16, which can be very crucial. If you compare the expected points from Gameweek 12 to 11, it's actually identical, with 54 for the upcoming deadline, and for Gameweek 12 is 54.3 according to the website FPL.team. I would highly recommend it for visualizing future game weeks, comparing different transfer plans, chip strategies, and much more, so you're well prepared for every single deadline. You can also do this by watching my FPL content. That includes the deadline stream on Saturday, where I'll be highlighting the clean sheet odds, top 10 captains with updated information, team news, injury updates, you name it. I've got Jared Bowen in 10th, facing Burnley at home, with Bruno Fernandes and Mbeumo facing Tottenham away in 9th and 8th. Gabriel is 7th, facing Sunderland away from home, and Joao Pedro is 6th, and you could argue he should be a bit higher. Jean-Philippe Mateta is 5th, facing Brighton in that very hectic and chaotic derby, with Merino and Saka just outside the top 2, which still includes Salah and Haaland, who will face each other. And I've got a great feeling about Merino once again, which I talked about in UCL Fantasy, but this would be nothing more than a 1-week punt, because after the international break, the hope for Arsenal is that players like Gyökeres will return from injury for really important clashes in those London derbies against Tottenham and Chelsea. So that is really just a Gameweek 11 punt, going for Mikel Merino. Beyond that, I just wouldn't recommend it, but it could be a perfect opportunity for those wildcarding in Gameweek 12. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy, which I'll cover until the end of the season. Let's get this video in particular to over 150 likes and close in on new goals like 38k on YouTube. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, prior to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you on Saturday for the next FPL deadline stream, and keep your eyes peeled for more FPL and UCL Fantasy content.